GM, and welcome to Finality, which is the podcast at the intersection of crypto infrastructure and economics. I'm Juri Maibaum, and every week I speak with people building, funding, and securing next generation of decentralized networks. Our goal is to unpack the incentives, risks, and opportunities shaping the business of crypto infrastructure. This is Finality, and today I'm joined by Max, who is the host of the Odyssey podcast. Max, we speak to each other regularly. Good to have you on here to this show as well.
Thanks for having me, Yuri.
100%. I mean, in the other episode that we recorded on the Odyssey the other day, we talked about, reflecting 2025 and also the macro backdrop we are seeing right now. I think we can all agree on the fact that the world is a very crazy place right now. But yeah, overall, what's your sentiment about 2025 to begin with?
I would say macro-wise, obviously most classes have been performing very well in 2025. Most surprisingly, precious metals. For crypto at large, I think 2025 has been much more disappointing from what most people have expected. If you are just looking at Bitcoin, maybe not so much. At least we have made a few all-time highs. I think even up to late September or early October, if I remember correctly. I think it was October 5th. Obviously, with a very harsh backdrop in the rest of Q4, a lot of the promises, a lot of the goals, a lot of the wishes of our industry that we have had back in 2021 and 2022 have realized last year, yet the value accrual has not taken place in our industry and its native assets at all. So I think that left many people back holding and many people disappointed. And frankly, even though prices, at least for BTC, were much, much higher than during the 2022, 2023 bear market, sentiment was roughly the same, if not even worse at some point in time. So I think most people finished 2025 with disappointment.
Yeah, 100%. I also agree on that. Overall, I would say that one thing is for very certain is that especially ETH was a disappointment for a lot of people. Like I think when the new administration came into place in 2024, a lot of people expected a strong Bitcoin takeoff in 2025 and then up only for all altcoins. But yeah, I would say that it played out much, much differently. Speaking of administration, I think macro is a very important thing to talk about here. I don't know how to put it, but do you think that macro is finally becoming a tailwind for the industry in 2026, or will everything just continue as it is and the crypto industry will experience an uptrend despite geopolitical uncertainty and the party just goes on, or does it just go down from here? What's your gut feeling here?
Well, if markets were rational, I think 2025 would have played out much more beneficial for this industry, and 2026 should continue that if the way that Bitcoin specifically represent itself as a geopolitical hedge and as the apolitical or at least politically neutral money that should benefit from all the tensions that are going on right now. Though it seems that at the end of last year, all of this demand for securing yourself against geopolitical volatility has gone into gold and silver and not into Bitcoin. So it is yet to be seen whether this will change in this year. I think we all hope to see that change. Again, I would gun to my head, probably bet on Bitcoin catching up in this year. I do think that it will outperform gold. I'm a little bit less opinionated about other crypto assets like ETH or Solana because there are different factors in play. It's not a mere game of geopolitics and liquidity, but more how we decide collectively to rate and value these assets. And if we are starting to apply traditional metrics, traditional financial metrics to their value, there's no way to justify the current valuations.
Yeah, totally agree on that. And I think, I think especially the Greenland and Venezuela story, like, let's see how this unfolds. And especially how the relationships with Europe and the US continue. But my honest response is if tensions, especially between Western countries, continues to rise, then yeah, there is not a real catalyst that could equalize this uncertainty,
Yeah, I agree that if we see a complete fallout in NATO and most of the Western nations, which have most of the capital under their control that is relevant for Bitcoin and other crypto assets, I also struggle to see a bullish outlook for this year. Um, yeah, I mean, with Venezuela, I don't think that would be detrimental for markets if that escalates further. Neither I think it would be for Iran. But if I mean, even though the alliance between the US and Europe has been cracking a bit last year, nobody has foreseen that it could escalate to the tension that we are seeing right now. And I think any tensions with Iran or Venezuela, that has basically been priced in. But if it escalates with regards to Europe, I think that could be quite detrimental for markets.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, like one thing that's maybe like on the good side of things is the institutional appetite, the institutional adoption. Um, like obviously this has led to a lot of tailwind for the industry, specifically because of the Trump administration. This was like, I would say, like one of the positives effects from 2024, 2025. However, a lot of these decentralization impacts completely vanished. Like people stopped talking about decentralization. Like I would say, like all of these denominators that we had to evaluate how decentralized a network is, it feels like a lot of these things are completely gone now. So, what do you think of institutional adoption versus decentralization? Will institutional adoption just completely take over and decentralization is just something that we see in the Bitcoin ecosystem and maybe in one or two others, but the rest is just, how finance is today, centralized?
Well, I would argue that decentralization from the get-go has always been a means to an end, and not an end in of itself. Similarly, as with the internet, that was also pioneered by a lot of cypherpunk people. It just doesn't reflect the utility and usage preferences of the masses. Because in order to preserve privacy, you usually have to give up a lot of user experience and less accommodating user interfaces. And I think that for most technologies, including crypto, it will play out in a similar way. Do I think that decentralization is dead? No. I mean, for Bitcoin, it is established. For Ethereum, it is established. Of course, we cannot take for granted that will forever remain this way. Let's say a majority of Bitcoin gets acquired or held by large custodians, by large TradFi asset managers, and they gain enough power to reshape the consensus because basically they just fork the chain and most people agree to follow their version. Similarly with Ethereum, whereas I would say that with Ethereum, unless we see like a nation state or east-west divide between who's using what chain, I think for Ethereum it is less likely that you will be able to consolidate interests down to one single common denominator that would be sufficient to fork the chain. Whereas the current trend between Bitcoin and gold points more towards gold being the favored asset of the global East and global South and the BRICS nations, whereas Bitcoin is more favored by the Western nations, at least if they manage to stay true to their original values, which I think, if we look at the current tensions, is up to debate as well. So I do think that the kind of the domination of one asset on one chain by a single asymmetrically powerful interest group is more likely for Bitcoin than for Ethereum. That is not to imply that it is easier to actually corrupt the chain Bitcoin than Ethereum. I would say it's the opposite there.
Yeah, totally get what you're saying. Let's maybe like continue also with like the institutional aspect here, because one thing that's also I think very important to cover is consolidation. I think if we look at all of the bigger crypto companies, bigger protocols, everything that makes sense is kind of consolidating. Everything is coming more together. A lot of people are getting laid off in the industry. Very similar pattern to what we see left and right. The world is a much different place right now compared to the golden 2021 times. So yeah, this is the current situation right now. So M&A activity has spiked last year, and personally, I also think that this will continue to be the case. What do you think?
Directionally agree. I think that quite a significant portion of existing crypto companies are uninvestable, also from an M&A perspective, simply because they don't have any product market fit. There's no clear path to revenue. And it just, unless you want to take a very explicit bet on the current team, that makes them rather unattractive. There are some cases where it's pretty much the vice versa, where you have a lot of contractors and not full-time employees. So it's very easy to cut the team, but maybe they have some sort of intellectual property or some brand that has value if it's either vertically or horizontally integrated into something else. These could become interesting because many of the 2021 and 2022 cohort founders just want to get out. They are fed up by the entire industry. So that could be interesting acquisition targets because they would probably be fine with reasonable prices.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, couldn't resonate with this even more.
Do you think that there's any specific sector which will see the most M&A activity?
Infrastructure side, the infrastructure side, everything that like is just throwing off cents is getting consolidated. We are going to talk about pennies, just to yeah, have the revenue matter intact. Yeah. Let's do like kind of a quick fire. I ask you a couple of questions, and then you just answer them in like one or two sentences. New Bitcoin all-time high, or will we go even, or will we go down or sideways? What do you think we will see?
I think both. I think we will break below the Q4 lows, but I also think that there is, let's say, a 30 to 40% chance of new all-time highs. But my base case would be that overall we will chop around in 2026. But I wouldn't discount volatility too much.
What about altcoins? Let's say specifically because there's so many, the big ones, ETH, Sol, Hyperliquid, and the rest.
I have a hard time imagining an all-time high for any of these large ones. Hyperliquid more likely than Solana and Ethereum if they manage to pull off some major integrations and product expansions. I also think that there's a higher likelihood that individual ones, it will be a very small selection, but that individual DeFi coins which can profit from buybacks or just a very clear product market fit and generating revenue, that these can hit all-time highs or at least have a higher percentage gain from their previous drawdown than the majors.
Then other question, does retail come back in 2026 or stay sidelined?
It will not come back.
Yeah, agree on that. Finally, tell me one winner. It can be a coin, it can be an ecosystem, it can be even a person that you predict to win big in 2026, and then a hot take.
I think for coins and projects, I'm reasonably confident on Pendle to make a comeback. If I look at the perps exchange space, I find Ostium quite interesting because I do think that on-chain commodity trading will be a big thing. Of course, there's a risk that they will get their lunch eaten by Hyperliquid if they just expand and dominate into the commodity space. But assuming that this will not happen immediately, I think they're poised for a big run-up. Other than that, in terms of hot takes, I don't think that any meme coin will come back to the extent that it was in the last year. So unless it is completely bundled, I would bet against any meme coin that is newly launched in 2026 to hit $1 billion, unless it is explicitly launched by some AAA celebrity, some G7 president or Putin or the Pope or whatever.
Yeah, strongly agree. My hot take is that ETH will that ETH will build out some land to its competitor, its respective competitor, which is Solana. I think in comparison to Solana, I think Ethereum will do much better compared to the past 2 years. That would be my hot take and my winner in one sentence, I would say. Overall, what would you say? 2026, good or bad year? Or medium?
Medium, but I think it will be even harder to make money as in the last years in this industry. Overall, I still think that the actual utility of the technology and a very select few winners will have a positive year. But overall, I don't think it will break the highs of 2021 for most coins. I still do think that there is a decent chance, if we see macro tailwinds, that we will see a new all-time high in the total market cap of all of crypto, probably led by Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, breaking the 2021 highs will be close to mission impossible for most coins. But yeah, on the other hand, if you stick around and survive, then further down the line, if we talk about 5 to 7 years from now, you may be one of the big winners. I mean, if we compare to what we have seen in 2017, 2018, when everyone doubted and thought everything is over, but sticked around one big 4 to 5 years later. So might be also the case that this gets repeated. But anyhow, Max, thank you so much for taking the time. I really wanted to have like a comprehensive yearly outlook because there's so many episodes out there with that take like 45 minutes to an hour, even longer. This was like a proper breakdown of what we can expect for 2026. And with that being said, make sure to follow Odyssey. Make sure to follow Max. The relevant links are in the description below, as always. With that being said, thank you for joining, Max.
Thanks a lot for having me.